Welcome to our Scary Stories, the podcast that will send shivers up and down your timbers. In this episode, we delve into the depths of the ocean to explore the eerie world of ghost ships. From phantom pirates to haunted sailors, these chilling tales will leave you feeling haunted and unsettled. Join us as we navigate the murky waters of the unknown and uncover the dark history of ghost ships and their haunting encounters. Our first story of the night is titled The Haunting Mystery of the Lost Crew. Captain James Johnson looked out into the dense fog, a worried expression on his face. "This fog is thicker than I've ever seen before," he said to his crew. "Keep your eyes peeled for any signs of trouble. We don't want to run into any ghost ships tonight." Tim Rogers, the first mate of the ship, looked at the captain skeptically. "A ghost ship? You gotta be kidding us, Captain." The grizzled old deckhand Tom scoffed. "I've been sailing these seas for years, and I've never seen any ghosts." Joe, the newest member of the crew, spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know about ghosts, but something doesn't feel right out here tonight." Martin, the old cook, piped in as he tried to calm everyone down. "Not to worry, I'll make you all a nice hot meal when we dock back at shore." Despite Martin's attempt to keep everyone's spirits up, the eerie stillness in the air made everyone on board uneasy. The fishing boat, with its old and rusty exterior, creaky wood, and peeling paint, felt even more ominous in the thick fog. The crew tried to keep busy with their fishing gear, but their minds were on the strange and eerie atmosphere that surrounded them. Captain Jack and his crew continued to sail through the thick fog, but as they progressed, strange occurrences started to take place. They heard whispers and laughter coming from the mist, but couldn't make out who or what was making those eerie noises. Doors and windows opened and closed on their own, and objects started to move around without any explanation, causing the crew to grow more uneasy by the minute. The sense of being watched only intensified, and it felt like a presence was surrounding them, creeping closer and closer. The crew tried to keep their composure, but the cold chills running down their spines told a different story. As they tried to make sense of the strange occurrences, the fog suddenly cleared, and a large, rusted ship appeared in front of them. The ship was massive, and the crew could see that it was in a state of disrepair. The sails were tattered, the wood was rotting, and the windows were broken. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. Captain Jack tried to steer the fishing boat clear of the vessel, but it seemed like the ghost ship was following them. The crew members could feel its presence drawing closer, and they could see that it was closing in on them with each passing moment. Fear and panic started to set in, and the crew members' heart rates increased as they began to realize that they might be in grave danger. They could feel their boat being dragged closer to the ghost ship, which was looming over them like a dark, ominous shadow. The crew tried to keep their composure, but it was a losing battle, and they knew they had to act fast if they wanted to survive this encounter. The fishing boat crew frantically tried to escape from the ghost ship quickly approaching, but the ghost crew was not going to let them go so easily. The ghostly figures started to lower ropes and nets onto the fishing boat, yelling and cursing as they made their way onto the deck. The living crew members were frozen with fear, unable to comprehend what was happening. The ghost crew began to board the fishing boat, their distorted faces filled with anger and hatred. The ghosts that appeared before the crew were a horrid sight to behold. Their flesh was rotting and decayed, emitting a putrid stench that made the crew gag. Their eyes glowed with a sinister light, as if they were filled with an insatiable hunger for the living. They were dressed in tattered clothing, with bits of seaweed and debris clinging to their forms. In their hands, they carried rusted weapons, the metal pitted and stained with age. The ghosts moved in unnatural ways, floating and phasing through walls as if they were ethereal beings. Their voices were raspy and haunting, and their laughter sent chills down the crew's spines. It was clear that they were filled with an intense hatred for the living, and they would stop at nothing to protect their ship and the dark secrets it held. The men from the small fishing boat fought back with all their might, swinging their weapons at the ghostly figures with all the strength they could muster. But it was all in vain, as their weapons seemed to pass right through the translucent forms of the ghost crew. They could feel the cold chill of their ghostly touch, and it made them shiver in fear. The ghost crew continued their relentless attack, unfazed by the feeble attempts of the living to fend them off. It was clear that these ghosts were determined to take every living crew member back to their boat, and nothing was going to stop them from doing just that. The fishermen were screaming and yelling as they were pulled away from the boat, one by one. They tried to hold on to anything they could, but the spirits were just too strong. First mate Tim watched in horror as his fellow crew members were taken away, their screams echoing through the night. He knew he had to get out of there before it was too late. Tim's heart was pounding with fear as he scrambled towards the lifeboat, his eyes fixed on the ghost ship looming in the thick, impenetrable fog. He could hear the blood-curdling screams of his crewmates as they were snatched away by the ghoulish crew of the cursed vessel, their agonized cries echoing across the water. His hands shook as he frantically fumbled with the knots securing the lifeboat, his breaths coming in ragged gasps as he tried to ignore the gnawing terror building inside him. Finally, with a sharp tug, the rope came loose, and he leapt aboard, quickly casting off from the doomed ship. As the lifeboat bobbed and rocked in the choppy waters, Tim watched in horror as the ghost ship and its malevolent crew slowly vanished into the eerie mist, their forms gradually fading until they were no more than faint shadows in the gloom. The last thing he heard was the anguished cries of his crewmates as they were dragged down into the depths of the ocean, their souls claimed by the vengeful spirits. The memory of that harrowing night would haunt Tim for the rest of his life, the screams of his friends ringing in his ears every time he closed his eyes. Even as he sailed away to safety, he knew that the ghosts of the cursed ship would continue to haunt him, their twisted faces etched forever in his mind. Up next tonight is our story titled The Cool Breeze of Hell. 6 college students gathered on the dock, eagerly waiting to board the sailboat they had chartered for the weekend. The ship's name was the Cool Breeze, and they couldn't believe their luck at finding such an affordable option for their getaway. As they stepped aboard, they were greeted by Captain John, a gruff but friendly man with a weathered face and deep-set eyes. The sun was shining that day, and the sky was a brilliant blue as they set sail, the wind catching the sails and propelling them forward. The students were excited to spend the weekend exploring the ocean and enjoying each other's company, but little did they know that their adventure was about to take a terrifying turn. As the Cool Breeze sailed away, the group of friends were excited for their weekend getaway. But their enthusiasm quickly turned to unease as they noticed something was not right with Captain John. He began to mumble to himself, and his behavior became increasingly bizarre. Olivia, the most outgoing and caring of the group, attempted to make small talk with him, but he was distant and unresponsive. The group brushed it off, chalking it up to a bad day, and hoped that things would improve. However, as the day progressed, Captain John's behavior only worsened, and the students couldn't shake off the feeling that something was deeply wrong with him. As the day progressed, the group noticed more and more disturbing changes in Captain John's behavior. He began to speak in strange tongues, and his eyes would roll back into his head. His movements became jerky and erratic, and the students began to feel more than just uneasy around him. Olivia spoke up again. "Captain John, are you feeling okay? You seem a bit off." Captain John turned his head to face her, and his eyes seemed to bore into hers. "I'm fine," he replied in a deep, guttural voice that was not his own. Mark stepped forward. "Maybe we should turn back. Something isn't right here." Captain John's head snapped in Mark's direction, and he let out a low growl. "No one leaves this ship," he said, his voice rising in volume. The students exchanged worried glances as Captain John's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started pacing around the ship, muttering to himself in a language that none of them could understand. They could see that he was becoming more and more agitated with each passing moment. Sarah whispered to the group, "We need to do something. This isn't safe." Jess nodded in agreement, "But what can we do? We're stuck on this ship with him." As the day turned into night, the students huddled together in fear as Captain John's behavior continued to escalate. He started throwing things around the ship and yelling incoherently. They could see that he was no longer in control of himself, and they feared for their safety. As the night grew darker, the students huddled in one of their cabins, seeking comfort in each other's presence. They had decided it was safer to stick together, with fear creeping into their minds about what could happen on this ill-fated trip. Suddenly, they were jolted out of their uneasy slumber by the piercing screams and cries for help of Captain John. The students rushed to the deck, where they found the captain contorting his body in ways that were inhumanly possible. The captain's eyes glowed with an eerie malevolence, and he let out a deep, guttural laugh. The students stood frozen in fear as the captain began to taunt and torment them, his voice deep and demonic. "You foolish mortals," he growled, "you dare to challenge my power. The captain's body began to shift and contort, with his face wincing into a grotesque sneer. His clothes began to tear and shred as his body transformed into something otherworldly. Olivia let out a whimper. What's happening to him? Jess whispered, this isn't right. This isn't normal. Mark tried to speak, but his voice was caught in his throat. The demon then cackled with glee. I have taken control of this vessel, and you shall all perish at my hands. He lunged forward, and the students scrambled back in fear. The demon's body twisted and warped as it continued to mock and threaten them, its voice dripping with malice. The students could feel the demon's malevolent energy seeping into every corner of the ship. It was as if the very air was alive with its evil intent. They knew they needed to act fast if they had any hope of escaping with their lives. As the demonic possession continued to take hold of Captain John, the students grew more and more desperate in their attempts to restrain him. We have to do something, cried Olivia as she and the others struggled to hold the captain down. He's too strong, said Mark, panting with exertion. I can feel the demon's power. Suddenly, Captain John began to chant in a strange language, his voice deep and guttural. The students watched in horror as he began to perform a dark ritual, his movements precise and purposeful. As the chanting grew louder, the ship began to shake, and the students realized with a sinking feeling that the demon was trying to do something very, very bad. As the demonic force inside Captain John's body gained strength, the students were plunged into their own personal hells, each one experiencing a nightmarish vision that dredged up their most painful and traumatic memories. Olivia's vision was of her mother, her ghostly figure pointing an accusing finger at her while whispering words of blame and resentment. The memory of her mother's death had always haunted Olivia, and she had never been able to shake the feeling that she could have done more to prevent it. Mark's vision was of his father, a dark and menacing figure looming over him, sneering and belittling him with his words of criticism and derision. Mark had grown up with an abusive father who had left him with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness, and the vision only served to confirm his worst fears. Jess's vision was of her ex-boyfriend, his face twisted in anger and spite as he spat out words of cruelty and control. Even though she had ended the toxic relationship, the memory of his emotional abuse still haunted her, leaving her feeling trapped and alone. As the students struggled to maintain their sanity in the face of these terrifying visions, the demonic presence inside Captain John continued to grow stronger, threatening to consume them all. With each passing moment, the situation grew more dire, and the students knew that they were running out of time. As each of the students was overwhelmed by their own traumatic experiences, the demon within Captain John began performing an even more dark and ominous ritual to open a portal to hell. The demon's chanting was guttural and terrifying, his voice echoing throughout the ship. He drew arcane symbols on the deck, and the air crackled with dark energy. The students could feel the temperature dropping, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist around them. They tried to resist, but the demon's power was too strong, and they found themselves being pulled inexorably towards the portal. One by one, they were dragged into the abyss, their screams echoing through the ship. The portal closed behind them, leaving no trace of the cool breeze or its passengers. The demonic captain was never seen again, and the incident became nothing more than a legend. Our next story of the night is titled Fool's Gold. The team of treasure hunters had been meticulously researching for months, poring over old maps, diving records, and historical documents to pinpoint the location of the sunken ship. They had studied the movements of notorious pirates, scoured the depths of the sea with the latest technology, and consulted with local experts on Caribbean maritime history. Each member of the team had contributed their unique skills to the effort. John, the team leader, had years of experience as a deep-sea diver and knew the waters like the back of his hand. Emma was an ambitious and fearless explorer, always willing to take risks and explore uncharted territory. Carlos was the tech expert, responsible for ensuring that the equipment was functioning optimally for the mission. Maria was the skeptical but tough diver, always ready to lend a hand in a crisis. And David was the enthusiastic and energetic member of the group, eager to embark on any adventure. After months of research and preparation, the team had finally found what they were looking for. They had discovered the sunken ship and were confident that the legendary treasure was hidden inside. The excitement among the group was hard to take as they prepared to dive down to the wreck. But little did they know they were about to experience something far more terrifying than they ever could have imagined. As they descended deeper into the ocean, they noticed that their communication systems were cutting out. John's voice crackled through the static. "Hey, is everyone experiencing communication problems?" Emma's voice came through. "Yes, I'm getting some strange interference. Can anyone else hear that noise?" Carlos chimed in. "It's not just the communication systems. My lights are flickering on and off. This isn't good." As they approached the sunken ship, the noises became louder and more distinct. Maria's voice trembled over the intercom. "Guys, I'm hearing whispers. Is anyone else hearing this?" David's voice echoed through the water. "I don't see anything, but I can hear it too. We need to keep moving." The team pushed forward despite their unease, but the strange occurrences continued. The voices grew louder and more frequent, and the divers started to feel like they were being watched. The water around them seemed to swirl and shift, as if something was moving just out of sight. John spoke up, his voice determined. "We need to find that treasure and get out of here. Stay focused and keep your eyes peeled for anything unusual." The team continued their descent, but the atmosphere was tense and uneasy. The ghostly whispers seemed to be getting louder, and the divers were on edge. As they approached the sunken ship, the ghosts materialized before them. The ghostly figures were terrifying to behold, with eyes that glowed with malevolent energy, and tattered clothes that hung off their ghostly frames. As they descended towards the sunken ship, the divers could see the outline of the vessel in the murky depths of the water. The closer they got, the more details became visible: the old and rusty hull, the tattered sails flapping in the current, and the broken masts jutting out at odd angles. As they approached, the water grew darker and the visibility reduced. An eerie feeling settled in their bones as they swam closer, and they could hear strange noises emanating from the ship. They could hear the whispers of ghostly voices in the water, as if the crew were still talking amongst themselves. Suddenly, they saw the ghostly figures of the crew, their bodies twisted and distorted. The faces of the spirits were contorted with anger and rage, their eyes glowing with a fiery intensity. The divers could see that the ghostly crew was armed with rusty swords and muskets, ready to defend their treasure at any cost. Maria shuddered, feeling the hair on the back of her neck stand up as she watched the ghostly crew. "Guys, we need to get out of here," she whispered through her communication system. David's voice crackled through the speakers in response. "No way, we didn't come all this way for nothing. We have to try and get that treasure." Emma chimed in. "But do you see those things over there? I don't think they'll just let us take it." John, the team leader, tried to maintain his composure. "We need to stick together and be careful. Keep your lights on them and stay alert." The divers continued to swim towards the ship, their hearts pounding in their chests. The ghostly crew continued to stare at them, their movements unnaturally slow and deliberate. As the divers approached the ship, they could feel the chill of the ghost's presence surrounding them. The dive team could hear the ghostly whispers growing louder and more menacing. Suddenly, the ghostly figures began to move towards them, weapons raised. The divers tried to flee, but the ghostly crew moved with them, blocking their escape. They could feel the weight of the water closing in around them as they struggled to swim away from the ghosts. They could hear the laughter and taunts of the spirits as they continued to pursue them. The ghostly crew closed in on the divers, their swords glinting in the eerie glow of the sunken ship. The treasure hunters were paralyzed with fear as the ghostly figures attacked them with ruthless abandon. The team's attempts to fight back were futile. Their weapons passed harmlessly through the ghosts. Suddenly, the captain of the ghostly crew emerged from the shadows, a menacing figure with a face broken down by centuries of living at the bottom of the ocean. "Who dares to disturb our rest?" The captain boomed in a deep, menacing voice. John, the team leader, stepped forward bravely. "We are treasure hunters," he said. "We mean no harm." The captain sneered. "All who seek our treasure must pay the price," he replied. He held out a hand, giving the treasure hunters a chilling ultimatum: leave the treasure and save their lives, or die with the gold. The divers knew they had to choose to escape, and the ghosts chased them relentlessly through the ship, taunting and laughing maniacally as they went. The team felt as if they were being herded towards a terrible fate, trapped on the ghostly ship forever. With the ghostly crew in hot pursuit, the treasure hunters knew they had to act fast if they were to escape with their lives. They darted through the ship's narrow passages, trying to shake off their pursuers, but the ghost seemed to know every twist and turn. Just as all hope seemed lost, the team spotted a glimmer of light in the distance, their diving boat. With renewed energy, they raced towards the light, with the ghosts close behind them. As they reached the surface, the team was gasping for air, but they had made it out alive. They clambered onto the boat, their hearts still pounding with fear, and looked back at the sunken ship. The ghostly crew was still visible, glaring at them with anger and frustration. But the treasure hunters knew that they had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. Shaken and humbled by their experience, the team quickly set sail, never looking back at the haunted shipwreck. They knew that they had pushed their luck too far, and that they had been lucky to escape with their lives. As they sailed away, they shared stories of their terrifying encounter, promising never to return to that cursed place again. And our final story of the night is titled There Is Something Worse Than the Storm. The Sea Titan, Captain Jameson's sturdy vessel, was on a mission to deliver a precious cargo of exotic spices and fine silks to the wealthy merchants of the distant land of Centauri. The crew had been at sea for what seemed like an eternity, battling against the unforgiving elements of the open waters. The journey had been a true test of their mettle, with harsh winds threatening to capsize the ship, turbulent waves slamming against the hull, and near constant rainfall that soaked them to the bone. Each day was a struggle, with the crew enduring sleepless nights and back-breaking labor to ensure the cargo's safe passage to its final destination. They faced each challenge with grit and determination, driven by the knowledge that their mission was of the utmost importance. The crew knew that the fate of the cargo and their own survival depended on their unwavering focus and tenacity. As the days turned to weeks, the crew began to feel the weight of their journey bearing down upon them. They were tired, hungry, and sore, but they refused to give up. They were seasoned sailors, and they had faced the fury of the sea before. They knew that their perseverance would be rewarded with the satisfaction of a job well done and the knowledge that they had delivered a precious cargo to its rightful owners. Despite their struggles, the seasoned sailors remained steadfast in their determination to complete their mission. As night fell, the storm intensified, and the wind began to pick up, howling like a pack of wolves across the ship's decks. The waves grew larger and more violent, slamming against the hull with such force that the entire ship shook. The thunder rumbled in the distance, punctuated by blinding flashes of lightning that illuminated the darkness. The only light came from the moon and the stars, casting an eerie glow over the water and revealing the whitecaps of the waves that crashed against the ship. But Captain Jameson and his crew were not ones to be easily deterred. They knew the risks of sailing in such treacherous waters, but they had a job to do. They braced themselves against the storm, clinging to the ropes and pulleys that kept the ship afloat. The cargo was their responsibility, and they would do whatever it takes to ensure it arrived safely at its destination. Suddenly off in the distance, they spotted an abandoned ship, drifting aimlessly in the water. The ship looked old and weather-beaten, with sails torn and bleached by the sun. Captain Jameson ordered the crew to board the ship to investigate. As they climbed aboard, they could hear the creaking of the old wooden planks beneath their feet. First Mate Richard Rogers led the way, his adventurous spirit leading him to explore the vessel's every nook and cranny. But as they explored deeper into the ship, strange noises and ghostly apparitions began to haunt them. The crew started to feel uneasy, and their nerves were stretched to their limits. Richard's heart raced as he saw a shadowy figure dart across the deck of the ship. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was just a trick of the moonlight, but the figure reappeared. He swallowed his fear and followed the figure to a cabin, where he found a dusty journal lying on a desk. The journal belonged to the ship's former captain, and it told a tale of mutiny and murder. The crew had turned on each other, driven mad by paranoia and fear. Richard's discovery on the abandoned ship had unearthed a dark and unsettling truth. As the crew delved deeper into the abandoned vessel, strange and unexplainable occurrences began to unfold. The ship seemed to have a life of its own, with strange whispers echoing through the darkened halls and eerie shadows dancing on the walls. As Richard shared his findings with the crew, their once cohesive team began to fray at the seams. Tensions ran high and paranoia set in, with each crew member accusing the other of being the cause of the strange happenings on the ship. The air was thick with fear and suspicion, and the crew's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. In the flickering light of the ship's lanterns, the crew started to see things that defied explanation. Ghostly apparitions lurked in every corner, their misty forms haunting the crew's every step. The sound of footsteps echoed through the empty halls, even though no one was there. Strange moans and whispers could be heard in the darkness, their source unknown and their meaning unclear. As the night wore on, the crew's paranoia grew, with each passing moment feeling more and more like a descent into madness. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting to strike. The once courageous sailors were reduced to quivering wrecks, their fear almost tangible in the heavy, oppressive air. With each passing moment, the ship seemed to grow more sinister, and the crew knew that they had stumbled upon something truly malevolent. The haunting had taken hold of them, and they were powerless to resist its pull. The ship had become a living nightmare, and the crew was trapped in its grip. Captain Jameson's gut told him that they needed to leave the haunted vessel as soon as possible. The crew scrambled to gather their things, but the ghosts had other plans. They attacked from every angle, their ghostly forms materializing out of thin air to torment the crew. As the crew fought to fend off the supernatural onslaught, Captain Jameson tried to keep a level head. He knew that the ghosts were trying to keep them on the ship, to claim them as their own. But the captain would not let his crew be taken by the otherworldly beings that haunted the ship. The ghosts came at them from every direction, their moans and screams filling the air. The crew narrowly escaped as they made their way to the deck, the ghosts pursuing them every step of the way. With the storm raging around them and the ghosts closing in, the crew's nerves were at their breaking point. They could feel the malevolent presence of the ghosts all around them, and they knew that they needed to get off the ship before it was too late. As they scrambled to lower the lifeboats, the ghosts intensified their attacks, grabbing at the crew's clothing and pulling them back. The crew fought with all their might, pushing back against the spectral attackers, determined to escape the haunted vessel. Finally, with one last burst of energy, the crew managed to cut themselves free of the ghostly grip and launch the lifeboats into the tumultuous sea. They rowed away as fast as they could, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. As they looked back at the haunted vessel, they could see the ghosts clinging to the sides, their eerie forms fading into the distance. But the sailors knew that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. They had faced the supernatural head-on and emerged victorious, their courage and determination saving them from the grasp of the ghostly entities that haunted the ship. Thank you for joining us for this bone-chilling episode of our scary stories. We hope you enjoyed the spine-tingling journey through the haunted waters of the ocean. Remember, the deep sea is full of mysteries and terrors that we may never fully understand. But with each story we uncover, we come closer to unlocking the secrets of the supernatural. We'll be back with more terrifying tales to keep you up at night, so be sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, keep your wits about you and beware of the ghosts that lurk in the deep. This is our Scary Stories, signing off for tonight.